Sleeping, make them get out on the floor. Tell
let me change some settings here. So we are going to be
And then
we're going to be playing, well, I'm going to be reading. I had to play Trampsta because I love Trampsta, but I wanted to set up everything so it was a little bit better. So we are going to be reading chapter 2 of Touch of Magic. And yeah, just a little gay to start off your day. So, hold on. Okay. So, chapter 2, Raphael. I grinned as I looked around the living room. It had taken me almost a week to get this place just right. The house I'd bought on the edge of Silent Creek Park was small, but it was home. Now, a week and a half after moving here, I finally felt like this place was mine. I'd spent the past week making sure every aspect of this place reflected me, and I couldn't stop smiling as I looked around the place. The sliding glass door that led into the backyard was open, so Naya, which is the squirrel, actually it's Thomas. All squirrels are Thomas. So Naya could come and go as she wished, and I'd hung some cute cream-colored lace curtains to pretty the place a bit. The couch I'd gotten was also cream-colored, and green throw pillows covered half of it, giving it a comfy feel. The wall behind the couch had a nice set of hexagonal frames that I picked up at the market, and I'd placed a small potted plant inside each frame with green vines and climbers hanging out of them, giving the room the greenery I needed. My magic was attuned to nature, and keeping myself surrounded by vegetation helped keep my energy full. It wasn't like I had much use of what powers I had, but living among plants was comforting, and I'd always felt more at home surrounded by them. I'd placed some taller show plants in the corners of the rooms, with a few herbs in pots I'd hung from the ceiling. I wasn't sure what a human would think if they ever saw my place. Did humans have so many in their house? Would they think I was crazy or just a nature freak? I shook my head as my thoughts drifted back to the man who had fallen on his knees in front of my house a week ago. I had still watched him every evening since that day, though I honestly hadn't meant to turn into a stalker. I was just a bit worried about him because he was clearly sick. Coming from a family of healers, I wasn't in the habit of ignoring someone who needed help. At least, that was the reason I gave myself when I found my thoughts returning to him again and again. Something about him had stuck with me. Part of me yearned to go check up on him, just to make sure he was okay. I didn't know why, but I needed to know he was okay. I felt restless at the idea that he might be in pain. It was like an itch under my skin that I just couldn't get rid of, and it seemed to grow worse the longer I went without seeing him. Groaning in frustration, I walked into the backyard, smiling as calm washed over me once I reached the oak tree. The tree was old and huge, and it had been the reason I had bought this exact house. The old owners had been planning to chop the poor thing down because apparently people wouldn't buy the house with the tree behind it. I'd taken one look at that gorgeous monstrosity and known I needed to save it. I'd made an offer without even going inside the house. My only focus was ensuring the tree stayed the way it was. The tree reminded me a little of the enormous willow we had in Ravenshire, right by the shrine of Elder Raynor. Elder Raynor had been a mage who discovered Ravenshire some 500 years ago, and turned it into a safe, haven for all the mages. His familiar, the animal companion of every mage, who was worthy of them, was gifted with, had been a raven, which was how the name Ravenshire came to be, if the stories were to be believed. The shrine of Elder Raynor stood right in the center of the island. The town wrapped all around it with circular winding streets. The willow tree had been the perfect lookout. We'd climb up its branches, hanging on with our toes. From the top, we could almost always see the entire island. The stone mansion belonging to the Romanov family the docks and huts near the lakes that were the home of the few water mages that lived there. Water and air were mages were more likely to move around and not settle down, a trait they probably got from the elements that they had an affinity towards. In that sense, I was a complete opposite. My affinity was to Mother Earth, and I had a connection with all the things that grew on her, from tiny weeds to huge trees. Like the plants, I needed to feel settled down, like I had roots in place to be completely comfortable. I'd felt that in Ravenshire, but not in my parents' house. Now here, in Missvale, I was hopeful I'd feel that again, the sense of home I'd always yearned for. I shook off the lingering tension in my arms and jumped, grabbing hold of one of the lower branches of the oak tree before hauling myself up. Once I was there, I didn't stop. I kept climbing until I reached the last branch that would support my weight. From this site, I could see the whole cul-de-sac. The houses were in a rough circle, with the Silent Creek Park at my back, and I could see all the houses from here, including Jai's. I could see him, too. He was just stepping out of his house with his dog, leash in hand. I'd stopped feeling like a stalker by now, completely accepting my status of being one, and I watched as Jai and his dog walked down the short driveway before turning towards my house. I knew I should look away, but I kept watching as they walked. The dog tugged on the leash every few seconds, his head cocked to one side, while Jai walked at a slow, sedate pace. He was even slower than the last time I'd seen him, and I wondered if he was feeling worse. I wanted to check up on him. I wanted to hold his hand and figure out exactly what he was suffering with. The thing was, I had no clue how I could do that without coming off as a crazy guy or a weirdo. It wasn't like I could tell him that I was a mage, and it wasn't like I'd be able to help him, even if I knew what he was suffering from. The way my magic had acted the other day had been nothing but a fluke, but there was no way I'd be able to help him. So why was I so obsessed with this man? Why couldn't I just let him go? And why had I turned into a stalker in my attempt to get to know more about him? I swore to myself as I watched the dog tug on his leash a bit too hard and escape Jai's hold. Jai looked stunned for a second, as if he couldn't comprehend what had happened, but then he seemed to gather himself and chase the dog, though I knew he wasn't healthy enough to be doing that. I switched my gaze to the dog and watched it sneak into my neighbor's yard. I knew that they had a dog. Seemed like Jai's doggo wanted to make a friend. I love that they use the word doggo. I scrambled down the tree and raced to the front just as Jai appeared on the sidewalk. My sudden appearance startled him, and he went down in the same spot I'd found him last time. I heard him curse and hurried to help him, pulling him upright. He swayed in my arms, and I realized he was dizzy. Just like last time, my magic reacted without my urging, and the amount of pain I sensed in him almost made me stagger. There were a few cuts on his palm, oozing a little blood from where he'd scraped them on the sidewalk, but the pain Jai felt was too much to be just from scrapes. What the hell was going on with him? "Come on, you need to sit," I said, leading him to my small porch. We were almost there when he froze suddenly, making us almost fall over since he'd been leaning against me. "What's wrong?" "Pads! My dog! I need to find him! Let me go!" I tightened my grip around his waist as he tried to get away. Calm down, calm down. I saw him sneak into the neighbor's yard. How about you just sit here and I'll go get him, okay? Jai looked up at me with his brown eyes that reminded me of freshly churned soil, a sheen of wetness covering them. "You'll find him?" "I promise. Just take a seat, and I'll get him. His name is Pads?" "Padfoot," Jai explained as he took a seat on the porch, his eyes snapping shut as if he was trying to fight another wave of dizziness. "All right, hold on. I'll be right back." I wanted to hold him for a minute and maybe try to reduce some of his pain, but I didn't know if my magic would be of help. The best way I could help Jai right now was getting his dog back. Then I'd patch up his wounds. I might not have help with my magic, but I knew how to do basic first aid. I wasn't completely useless, no matter what my parents had liked to tell me. Now we are switching to Jai's point of view. Jai. I kept my eyes shut as I took a few shallow breaths and tried to escape the dizziness. I knew my hands weren't hurt too badly, but my body apparently hadn't gotten the memo. It was the same every time. No matter how few drops I bled, my body always reacted like I was on the brink of death, making me dizzy and unsteady. I couldn't believe I'd stumbled in front of Raphael. Again. On my knees. Again. If it wasn't so absolutely humiliating, it would be funny how I ended up on my knees every time I came across Raphael. But it was. It was so damn embarrassing. I wish the ground would open up and swallow me so I wouldn't have to face him. Why did this keep happening? He was leaps and bounds out of my league, and I knew there was no way he'd want me. The least I could have done was maintain my distance. Maybe we could have even become friends for a short while before he realized how soul-sucking being my friend was. Instead, I'd taken every opportunity I could to humiliate myself in front of him. Fuck, I was pathetic. A cheery woof broke me out of my self-deprecating thoughts, and then Pads was there, covering my face with licks. My heart stuttered in my chest as relief swamped over me, and I pulled him into my arms, holding onto his neck tightly as I let his familiar furry body comfort me. Padfoot wasn't just my dog. He was my companion, my partner in crime, and the only being in the world who wasn't tired of dealing with me. He didn't care if I couldn't take him on walks every day, or if there were days where all I wanted to do was lie in bed and cuddle him. He didn't mind that I never went out, that I could almost never play with him. He was just there for me. I loved him, and even the thought of losing him was enough to make me panic. I finally opened my eyes to see Raphael watching us with a soft smile on his face. My cheeks blazed hot as I gave him what I hoped was a grateful smile. Thank you so much for finding him, Raphael. It was no problem. He was just socializing with the neighbor's dog. Also, call me Raph. I nodded and bit my lip as I readied myself to stand up. I felt steady enough then that I knew I wouldn't stumble. All right, then. I'll get out of your hair. Sorry for troubling you. Again. Raphael's brows shot up to his hairline, and he shook his head as he walked closer. Oh, no. You're not leaving yet. I need to clean up those scratches on your palms. God knows what nasty germs you picked up from the sidewalk. How about you come in and I'll patch you up over some tea and cookies? Tea and cookies? I almost chuckled because that had been my grandma's go-to for every problem. Wow. I just compared my neighbor and, hopefully, potential friend to my grandmother. Way to go, Jay. Raphael was walking over to his door before I could decline his invitation. He held the door open and looked at me expectantly. With a sigh and a shake of my head, I grabbed Padfoot's leash and led him inside. The floor plan of Raphael's house seemed similar to mine, but while I decorated my living room in soft brown, Raphael's was an explosion of beige and green. There were plants everywhere. It gave the room a cool, minty atmosphere, and a strange sort of calm washed over me as I took a seat on his beige couch, which was half covered in pillows. Green pillows. First, I'll disinfect your wounds, and then I'll make some tea, all right? I nodded as he walked into where I guessed the bathroom was and came back with a first aid kit. He kneeled on the floor in front of me, his blonde hair falling into his face as he looked through the first aid kit. My fingers itched to touch the strands behind his ear, and I bit my lip to stop myself. What the fuck was wrong with me? He was a stranger, no matter how gorgeous or kind he was. He tucked his hair behind his ears as he grabbed my palm lightly in his. The moment our skin touched, a zing shot through my body. followed immediately by a strange sense of calm. It seemed to watch over all of my body. I knew I was just imagining it, but I also felt like the aches in my body became less intense as the feeling washed over me. I shook my head to get rid of the weirdness, and focused on Raphael as he soaked a cotton ball with disinfectant and swiped it over my palm in careful light strokes. I'd gotten so used to all kinds of medical treatments from so many people that its gentleness took me by surprise. The nurses weren't exactly harsh, but I was just another patient to them. Raphael, though, he treated my wounds as if he cared. Nah, it was just fanciful thinking. Why in the hell would Raphael care about me? As he treated my hand, I realized I should probably tell him why he kept finding me on my knees on the sidewalk. Plus, nothing worked easier at pushing someone away than telling you were terminally ill. Sorry I keep falling over at your place. I swear it isn't intentional. I have a rare heart illness, which has also fucked up my lungs, so sometimes I get exhausted easily. Well, actually, most of the time. It's okay. You don't need to explain yourself to me, Raphael said, shooting me a soft smile that lit up his unique eyes. I never seen ones quite like his before. They were a mix of green and brown, but they were much darker than any green eyes I'd ever seen. If I had to compare, I'd say his eyes looked like tree bark coated in moss. It looked way more enchanting than it sounds. It surprised me when he went back to covering the cuts with small band-aids, as if my confession meant nothing. Usually, when I told people about my illness, they had a million questions. How long have you been sick? Is it terminal? What about treatments? Yet here he was, acting as if my sickness was no big deal. For the first time, a ray of hope filled me. Could I actually have a shot? Did I have a chance at making Raphael my friend? All done. Now how about some tea? Or would you prefer coffee? No caffeine, please. Tea sounds great. Caffeine didn't go well with my medicines. If I was being honest, a lot of things didn't jam with me. Normal friendship was one of them. I had two best friends, and one of them was my younger brother, while the other one was someone I only talked to online and had never actually met. It wasn't that I hadn't tried. I had. So many times I made friends, only for them to slowly drift away after one too many canceled plans. Sooner or later, they realized I would never be there for them the way they had to be there for me. I'd never be able to go to a party with them, or a trip, or even hang out for longer than an hour or two unless it was in the comfort of my own home. I didn't fault them for ditching me. I would have probably done the same if the roles were reversed. It still stung, though. It had also taught me that I wasn't made to have friends. I had Padfoot and my brother, and they were enough. I needed them to be enough, or I knew I'd succumb to the depression that was always there, waiting for me to feel weak to pounce on me, as if I didn't already have enough problems to deal with. Sorry, I am struggling to read this without laughing. I'll do my best. You okay? Raphael asked as he placed a tray with 2 cups of tea, sugar, cream, and some cookies on the coffee table before me. I looked up at him and blinked, wondering if I was seeing things. There wasn't a squirrel on his shoulder, right? Is that a squirrel? My voice was so soaked in disbelief, and yet all Raph did was push the squirrel's bushy tail away from his face and grin at me. Oh, yes, this is Naya. She lives here too. Well, she lives in the tree in my backyard, but she spends most of her time here. You have a pet squirrel, I stated in a dry voice, still reluctant to believe what I was seeing and what he was telling me. They looked adorable together, to be honest. The squirrel, Naya, had wrapped herself around Raphael's neck and looked all kinds of comfy as she watched me with her beady black eyes. He scrunched up his nose in a way that made him look adorable, and I realized he had some light freckles on his nose that seemed to make him even cuter. I needed to stop noticing how gorgeous he was. I wouldn't call her a pet per se. She's more of a friend to me, honestly. Like me and Padfoot, I said with a smile as I grabbed my cup. I added some sugar, though milk was another no-no for me. I had a lot of those too. I'm sorry, I just have to laugh. Because also, my old roommate's dog, Donut, was a 4.5 pound Chihuahua, and so there were times that I would literally just put him on my shoulder and go into a store. Like, I'd be pumping gas and I'd go in to buy an energy drink and just have like a dog on my shoulder. And it was so funny to see people's reactions when they're like, "Wait, that's just a dog on that guy's shoulder? What? What?" Okay. Pull it together, Kyle. If someone were to take a peek into my thoughts, they would think I was the most whiny son of a bitch ever. But then again, it was better to whine where no one could hear me than to appear pathetic, right? Over the years, I'd gotten used to keeping my pain to myself, mostly because I hated the guilt that came with telling my parents about it and the way they made me feel so much less when I was with my friends. Yep, you can let him go, you know. The backyard is secure. He won't go anywhere, Raphael said as he took a seat on a nearby armchair. I nodded and unclipped Padfoot's leash, but instead of going outside like I thought he would, he rushed to Raphael's side and started sniffing at Naya. Raphael chuckled and petted Pads as he continued to sniff. The tiny squirrel clung to Raph's ear for a minute before hesitantly reaching for Pads' foot. My sweet boy froze immediately, standing stock still as Naya hopped onto his back. He went a little cross-eyed trying to find the squirrel, but then he seemed to shrug and race off towards the backyard, Naya holding on to him for the ride. He wouldn't hurt her, right? I wondered aloud. Padfoot was a sweet guy, but he was huge compared to Naya. Nah, I bet they'll already be friends by the time you leave. I grinned at his pronouncement and went back to sipping my tea. The silence turned awkward quickly, since we were both still strangers. I looked around the room, trying to find something to talk about, because I knew once I started getting anxious, I'd end up saying something that would embarrass me. "You have a lot of plants," I blurted out, immediately cringing at my obvious statement. Okay, life story. One person that I dated, the first time that we like talked, she tried to ask what it was very much of this situation. She tried to make conversation by asking like what type of food I liked and that sort of thing, just like as a, you know, making conversation. But instead, all she actually said was, "Do you eat?" And so then I told her, "No, I'm a robot. I just recharge in the sun." And I dated them for a year and a half. Anyway, yeah, you have a lot of plants. That's. I'm sorry, I'm dying. Raphael didn't seem to mind, though. He just gave me this wide smile that lit up his dark eyes and nodded. "Yeah, I'm a nature lover. I bought this place because of the tree in the backyard. I like the greenery, I suppose." I nodded as I peeked out the back door, and a sound of surprise and awe slipped out of me as I spotted the humongous oak tree in his backyard. Damn, the tree was enormous. If I were healthy, I would have loved nothing more than to climb it. I used to do that when I was a kid, back before my condition turned so bad that even the slightest exertion tired me. I miss doing that. I miss doing a lot of things. I shook off the thoughts with a practiced precision and focused on Raphael as he sipped his tea. The guy was gorgeous. I couldn't stop thinking about that. It wasn't just his physical attributes either. He was a sweet guy. He'd helped me both of the times he met me, and I never felt like I had inconvenienced him, even though everyone, including my parents, made me feel so, albeit unintentionally. I hated how much I had to depend on others, and yet I didn't feel like that when he helped me. The way his presence always seemed to calm me down or reduce my exhaustion was something I couldn't figure out. Did I feel better because I enjoyed his company? That had to be it, right? After all, what else could it be? You live just a few houses away, right? Raphael asked, pulling me out of my thoughts. I nodded, and he smiled before extending his hand, palm up. Can I have your phone for a minute? My brows furrowed at the strange request, but I pulled my phone out of my pocket and handed him, curious about what he wanted it for. He tapped a few keys before handing the phone back to me. There, you have my number now. Call or text if you'd like to hang out sometime. You want to be my friend? I asked, and in the dis and the disbelief in my voice couldn't have been clear. Raphael shot me a wicked grin, winking as he got up, the empty tray in his hands. As we reached the doorway, he called out, disappearing into the kitchen mid-sentence, so I couldn't tell if he truly meant it. Friends would be a good place to start, don't you think? Wait, what? And that's the end of chapter 2. And that's where I'm going to call it for today, because I do need to do some work. So, we will start chapter 3 either later tonight or tomorrow. We are 11% of the way through the book, and it is already incredibly horny. So, have a good time, guys. I will see you all later. And, yeah.